What's the hardest thing you've had to forgive, or never could?
They say every family has its favorite, but in mine, it wasn't just obvious, it was orchestrated like a Broadway production. My brother Tyler, 3 years younger and infinitely more charming, had been the undisputed golden child since the day he first spit up Gerber peaches and made our mother laugh. I used to wonder, as a kid, if maybe I was adopted and no one had the heart to tell me. Maybe I was the neighbor's daughter who wandered into the wrong crib and just never left. That theory started the year I turned 10 and spent the day sitting on the back porch with a homemade cupcake and a candle I fished out from under the sink. I remember the icing sliding off in the July heat, the match burning my fingers, and me singing happy birthday to myself in the quiet, while my parents sipped margaritas in Cabo San Lucas celebrating Tyler's 7th birthday on a rented catamaran. The postcard they sent arrived 3 days later. It had a sea turtle on it. Not even a happy birthday written. On the back, just weather is perfect. Tyler's having a blast. Love, Mom and Dad. That memory lives in my brain like a splinter you can't dig out, always there, small, sharp, and pulsing when touched. And it wasn't just that one year. It became a pattern. A rhythm. Like breathing. Tyler's birthday was sacred. Always an event. Always a new theme, a rented space, catered food, custom cakes that could have won baking shows. One year they brought in a magician from Vegas. Another, they chartered a private boat around the Keys. When he turned 21, there was a rooftop bar takeover. I wasn't invited. My mom told me, "It's mostly Tyler's friends, honey, you wouldn't know anyone." The truth? I was already invisible. So I stopped bringing it up. I stopped reminding them. I stopped hoping. Every year I'd get a text, sometimes late, sometimes not at all. The kind that read like an afterthought. "Hey, happy birthday, sweetie. Hope it's a good one." No calls. No cards. No cake. Nothing from them in person unless I happened to be in the same zip code, and even then, it felt like I was interrupting something more important. And somehow I made peace with that, or at least I told myself I had. But this year was different. This year I turned 42. 42. That number stung, not because I feared aging, but because it meant I had been accepting scraps of affection for over 4 decades and calling it normal. And I had done well for myself, very well actually. I had a marketing firm, 2 rental properties, and savings that didn't come from anyone's handouts. I built everything alone. Quietly. While Tyler burned through 2 failed businesses and a series of girlfriends who looked like they'd all been cut from the same Instagram filter. Our parents still called him ambitious, with a hopeful little smile, like he was just one pitch deck away from greatness. Meanwhile, I'd made partner at 35, and no one even brought it up at Thanksgiving. My mom said, "Oh, that's nice," and asked me to pass the yams. So when I got the group text this year, sent to family with a champagne emoji announcing Tyler's upcoming birthday bash, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel anything, honestly. Just confirmation. It was the same formula as always. Yacht. Catering. Sunset DJ. Dress code, coastal chic. The only difference was that this time, I didn't pretend to be surprised. I didn't text back, "Sounds fun." I didn't ask if they'd forgotten my birthday again. I didn't do anything. I just sat on my couch, stared at the screen, and thought, let them have it. Because while they were busy hiring bartenders for a floating party, I was finalizing something else. Something I had been building, planning, and paying for in full. A house. Not just any house, a lake house. A modern open space, wood and glass sanctuary on a quiet patch of shoreline 2 hours north of the city. It started as an idea, a sketch in a journal I kept in my nightstand. Something I drew on bad days. Something that felt like freedom. I had never told my parents about the land I bought 5 years ago. I never mentioned the endless meetings with architects or the weekends I spent staining boards and hauling debris. Tyler was on his 4th girlfriend and his 2nd real estate crash during those months. No one noticed I had disappeared. And that was the gift. Invisibility gave me the power to create something no one could take credit for. No loans. No input. No compromises. Just mine. Brick by brick, frustration became foundation. All the quiet disappointments hardened into purpose. And now it was finished. I stood there on the dock that week, the water still as glass, the sky bruising with sunset, and I thought, this is what it feels like to do something for yourself, without needing a single cheer from the sidelines. I took a picture, just one. Me on the edge of the dock, wine glass in hand, house glowing behind me. I wrote the caption slowly, deliberately, every word chosen like a stone in a slingshot. Built this without a birthday cake. But I didn't post it. Not yet. Because timing is everything, and this wasn't just about showing off a house. It was about years. Layers. A life lived in the shadows of someone else's spotlight. And I wanted the light to hit just right. So I waited. Patient. Calm. The birthday yacht party was in 5 days. Let them dance on the deck. Let them clink glasses. Let them toast to Tyler, the prince of potential. I'd be here. On my dock. With my house. My peace. My victory. Quiet. Solid. Unbothered. But I'd be lying if I said that was enough. Because revenge? Even the silent kind? It needs an audience. And when the photo goes up, I know exactly who's going to be watching. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that sets in when you realize the people who are supposed to know you best, your blood, your foundation, the ones who taught you how to tie your shoes and cross the street, have never actually seen you. Not really. Not beyond the roles you played quietly and confidently, without complaint, because asking for more felt like shouting into a canyon and hoping for something other than your own echo to answer back. I think the last time I truly believed my parents might change, might notice, was the year I turned 30, because there's something heavy about that number, something culturally loaded with meaning and milestones. As if 3 decades of life should be enough to warrant a genuine moment, a toast, a glance of pride, or at the very least, a dinner that wasn't cobbled together in a half-empty fridge while someone else's celebration played in the background. That year, I had just been promoted to senior partner at the firm, after working 12-hour days for 2 straight years, juggling 3 accounts that each could have eaten me alive if I hadn't been smarter, faster, and more thorough than every man in the room. I bought a new black dress, simple but elegant, and waited for the weekend, thinking maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. My birthday fell on a Sunday, and I imagined a lunch or dinner at the very least, a quiet place with white tablecloths and my parents sitting across from me, asking real questions about my life that didn't involve surface-level nods or rerouted conversations back to Tyler's latest venture or breakup or social media following. Instead, what I got was a box on my doorstep with a kitchen gadget I hadn't asked for and a card that said, 30 is flirty. Love, Mom and Dad. It arrived 2 days late, postmarked from a golf resort in North Carolina where they had joined Tyler for his business retreat. I still remember standing in my kitchen, holding the card in one hand and the salad spinner in the other, thinking how it might be funny if it weren't so predictably sad, like watching a rerun of a sitcom you used to like before you grew out of it. It was in that moment that something began to shift, not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quiet corners of my heart, where the walls that had always bent under pressure slowly began to crack, not because of one single moment of cruelty or violence, but because of the 1,000 little cuts of being unseen, year after year, celebration after celebration, while Tyler's every mediocre achievement was treated like the second coming of Christ. And maybe if he were awful, truly unbearable, it would have been easier to hate him, but Tyler had a way of being infuriatingly likable, the kind of man who could charm a waitress into comping dessert and talk his way out of a speeding ticket with nothing more than a lopsided grin and a harmless story about running late to meet his mom. He had charisma, the kind that came naturally, the kind that made people want to believe him, even when he lied. So this year, when the group text arrived announcing the plans for his 39th birthday, another yacht, this one docked at a private marina with open bar, curated playlists, and a surprise guest chef, I didn't feel surprised or even disappointed. I just felt tired. Bone-deep tired. And not because of the party itself, but because of what came before it. Or more precisely, what didn't come. My birthday had been 2 weeks earlier. No text. No call. Nothing. Not even from Tyler, who posted a photo that day with the caption, "Grind, don't stop," while holding a champagne bottle on some rented rooftop, tagging a tequila brand he didn't even drink. I spent my birthday the same way I had for the last 5 years alone. I woke up at 7, made coffee in my quiet apartment, pulled on jeans, and drove north to the lake property, where construction on the house had entered its final stages. The framing was up, the roof sealed, and the windows were being installed the next day. I parked under a cottonwood tree, sat on the hood of my car, and stared out at the water for a long time, sipping lukewarm coffee and thinking about how sometimes survival doesn't look like screaming or slamming doors, it looks like persistence. Like putting on work boots and building something that no one else understands until it's already standing. That day, I drove into town to pick up supplies, lumber, hardware, insulation. At the register, the clerk saw my ID and said, "Oh hey, happy birthday," and I laughed, loud and sharp, not because it was funny, but because it felt like a punch from the universe. A reminder that strangers often see you more clearly than the people who raised you. I bought myself a slice of lemon pie from the bakery down the street and ate it in the driver's seat with the window rolled down, watching kids chase each other in a field across the road. Thinking how odd it is that we spend so much of our adult lives grieving the things our childhoods should have given us for free affection, attention, the quiet confidence that you matter simply because you exist. Later that night, back in my apartment, I opened my phone and scrolled through old birthday photos, well, Tyler's birthday photos. Dozens of them, taken over decades, all smiles and sun-drenched filters and custom cakes. One year, they even hired a drone to film the whole event from the air. I watched the footage without sound, watching as he danced on a yacht surrounded by people, my parents in the background raising glasses of champagne like royalty watching their air. That footage had over 2,000 likes on Facebook. My last birthday post got 13, including 2 from coworkers and 1 from my accountant. And that's when I wrote the caption. I didn't post it, not yet, but I wrote it in my notes app, the words flowing out of me like they'd been sitting in my chest for too long. Built this without a birthday cake. Just that. No hashtags. No explanations. Just the truth. Because sometimes, the loudest scream is the one whispered at just the right moment. And when I post it, when the timing is right, it won't just be a picture of a house. It'll be a monument to every moment they forgot I was there, and a quiet reminder that I learned to survive not because of them, but in spite of them. And when that lands, I want to see how silence feels on the other side. There's a unique kind of satisfaction that blooms in solitude, not the fragile kind that needs validation or applause, but the deep, unshakable kind that comes from doing something entirely for yourself, building something from nothing. Quietly and deliberately, knowing full well that no one will be there to praise your discipline or admire your effort, and still doing it anyway. The lake house wasn't born from some whimsical Pinterest board or midlife fantasy. It rose out of a lifetime of watching my needs come last, of waiting for someone to remember me, for someone to say, "You deserve something beautiful," and realizing, year after year, that no one ever would. So I built it myself. Not out of spite, not even out of ambition, but out of a raw, exhausted kind of necessity. The land came first. 7 acres of wooded slope leading down to the water's edge, purchased quietly and in full 5 years ago, after a particularly grueling Christmas dinner where my mother spent 3 hours recounting Tyler's brilliant potential. In a voice so high and hopeful you'd think he was curing cancer instead of launching yet another subscription box business that folded in 6 months. That night, I stared at the ceiling of my apartment for hours, wondering how much longer I could sit in rooms where I didn't exist, how many more holidays I could endure where my presence was treated like a footnote at best and an interruption at worst. I clicked through real estate listings at 2 in the morning, driven less by any real plan and more by the aching need to imagine a place where I could just be, a place that belonged to me, where I didn't have to shrink or justify or perform. The next weekend, I drove upstate and found the land. It wasn't grand or flashy, but there was something in the way the trees leaned gently toward the lake, something in the quiet curve of the shoreline, that felt like permission. I signed the papers within the week. No one knew. I told my assistant I was taking Fridays off for mental health. I told my mother I was spending time refocusing. What I didn't say was that I was meeting with architects, digging trenches for septic tanks, and comparing siding materials at hardware stores while Tyler was busy filming promotional reels for his crypto podcast. Every weekend became a ritual: boots in the trunk, thermos of black coffee, gloves, tools, blueprints folded under my arm. It wasn't glamorous. It was sweat and mosquito bites and sunburns and learning the hard way that YouTube tutorials never show you how to deal with a cracked waterline or raccoons in your rafters. But it was mine. Every blister on my palm, every splinter in my skin, felt like proof that I was still here, that my life had weight, that my hands could shape something real even if my family never saw it. Monica came up once, just once, on a rare weekend when her kids were at their dad's and she needed to get the hell out of suburbia before she screamed into a pillow for 3 hours straight. She stood on the unfinished deck, holding a beer in one hand and a hammer in the other, and said, "Jesus Christ, Laura, this is your Batcave. I didn't think you were serious when you said you were building a lake house. I thought it was like therapy speak." I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that fills your chest before it escapes. "It is therapy," I told her. "Just with nails instead of tears." We spent the weekend painting the upstairs walls and assembling kitchen cabinets, while music played from her phone and the wind rolled off the lake like a promise. At night, we sat by the fire pit, and she asked if I was going to invite my family once it was done. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because the silence felt like the only honest response. What was I supposed to say? That I still hoped for a version of my mother who would walk through the front door and say, "I'm proud of you"? That some childish part of me still waited for my father to look at the beams I'd stained by hand and say, "You did this? This is yours." The truth was, I didn't want them there. I didn't want their compliments or their shallow curiosity. I wanted them to stay exactly where they had always been, far away, distracted, unaware, so that when the moment came, when I finally pulled the curtain back, it would hit like thunder. A week later, as I was staining the deck alone and watching the wood darken under my brush, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "Don't forget Tyler's big day is next week. Yacht is leaving at 6. Bring sunscreen." No mention of my birthday. No mention of my house. No question about where I'd been for months. Just another command, another expectation wrapped in cheerful punctuation. I stared at the message for a long time, paintbrush still in my hand, then opened the photo app and snapped a picture of the view from my dock, sunlight hitting the water like molten glass, the trees reflecting perfectly on the surface. The kind of view people dream about when they say they're getting away from it all. I sent the photo in reply. No words. No emojis. Just the image. 5 minutes later, another message. "Wow. Beautiful. Where is this?" I left her on read. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Anger had been replaced by something colder, something stronger: clarity. They had made it clear where I stood in their world, and now, for the first time, I had something solid under my feet that didn't depend on their approval. They could toast Tyler on the boat, laugh under rented lights, sip champagne from crystal flutes, and celebrate his mediocrity dressed up as ambition. But I wouldn't be there. Because I had built something better, something that didn't need a yacht, or a cake, or even a damn birthday card. I had built a place where I finally mattered. And soon, they were going to see it. Not because I needed them to, but because I wanted them to know exactly what they missed. There are certain moments in life that arrive without fanfare, without thunder or spectacle, but you still feel them before they happen, like a low rumble under the ground, subtle but unmistakable, a vibration that tells you everything is about to shift. And whether anyone else feels it or not, you already know that nothing will be the same afterward. For me, that moment came 2 days after Thanksgiving, but its roots were planted weeks earlier, as I stood in my almost finished lake house with sawdust clinging to my jeans, a steaming mug of coffee in one hand, and the full weight of a lifetime of being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated finally ripening into something clear and undeniable. Thanksgiving had always been a performative farce in our family, a day soaked in passive aggression and overcooked turkey, where my mother would dress the table like a magazine spread and then spend the next 6 hours hissing criticisms at anyone who tried to help. There was always tension buried beneath the surface, like a fault line we all agreed not to touch. Tyler's latest failure dressed up as a brave risk, my silence framed as stoicism. My achievements skimmed over like the fine print of a contract no one had time to read. That year, I debated skipping it entirely, staying at the lake house and letting them assume I was busy, unavailable, gone. But some part of me, maybe pride, maybe pettiness, maybe just habit, decided to go anyway, to sit at that table one more time and see if they noticed how much I had changed. I arrived at my parents' house 30 minutes late, not because of traffic, but because I couldn't bring myself to walk in on time, couldn't bring myself to sit at that table and pretend I was still the same invisible daughter I had been for 42 years. When I finally stepped through the door, the same foyer I had walked through since childhood, I saw that nothing had changed. Same floral runner on the stairs, same gold-framed photo of Tyler's high school graduation on the wall. The one where he held his diploma like a trophy and my parents beamed like he had just won a Nobel Prize. No photo of me. There never had been. My mother greeted me with an air kiss and a distracted, "Oh, you made it," before spinning away to adjust something in the kitchen, and my father barely looked up from the football game, lifting his beer slightly in acknowledgement, like I was a UPS delivery and not the daughter they hadn't seen in months. Dinner was exactly what I expected, an exhausting theater of forced cheer, with Tyler recounting his recent business pivot to an attentive audience who nodded and smiled as though they hadn't heard the story a dozen times before. I listened in silence, chewing slowly, sipping wine I had brought myself, because I knew better than to expect my preferences to be stalked. At one point, Tyler turned to me and said, still doing that marketing thing, in the same tone you'd use to ask someone if they were still flipping burgers at the diner, and when I replied, yeah, just closed a 7-figure contract last quarter, he blinked and said, nice, before launching into a tale about how he was this close to landing a celebrity client for his new branding agency. What stunned me wasn't the dismissal itself. I had grown used to that. It was how effortless it had become for them to ignore me, how second nature it was for them to treat Tyler's promises as fact and my reality as footnote. After dessert, my mother leaned across the table, smiling like she had just remembered something mildly amusing, and said, by the way, I saw that little cabin thing you're building on Facebook or something. Cute. Is it like a rental project? The air in my chest turned sharp. No, I said, setting down my fork. It's mine. It's where I live now. Her smile froze, just slightly, like someone pressed pause mid-frame. Oh, she said. Well, good for you. It must be nice to have a little weekend spot. That night, I drove back to the lake house in silence, the kind of silence that settles into your bones and makes you feel every inch of distance between who you used to be and who you are now. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just parked the car, stepped out into the cold night air, and looked at the house standing tall and solid against the lake's reflection. There was a power in that silence, in knowing I didn't have to explain myself anymore, didn't have to beg to be seen. They had made their choice over and over, and now it was my turn to speak. Not with confrontation, not with shouting, but with the truth, laid bare and undeniable. I went inside, turned on every light in the house, walked room to room and let it sink in. The kitchen I had designed down to the last drawer, the fireplace I had stacked stone by stone, the bedroom windows that faced the sunrise because I had always wanted to wake up to light. I poured a glass of red wine, stepped out onto the deck and snapped the photo. No filters. No touch-ups. Just me, standing barefoot on the dock, the house glowing behind me, the lake still and silver under the moonlight. The caption came easily, as if I had been writing it in my mind for years, waiting for the perfect moment to set it free. Built this without a birthday cake. I posted it just after midnight. Within minutes, the notifications began: likes, comments, private messages. Friends. Old classmates. Coworkers. People I hadn't spoken to in years. The comments were fast and unfiltered. This hit me in the chest. I feel this too deeply. I don't even know you, and I'm proud of you. Girl, this is the loudest silence I've ever seen. It spread quickly. The algorithm knew a reckoning when it saw one. And then, predictably, came the text from Tyler. What the hell is your problem? No greeting. No punctuation. Just that. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. There were so many things I could have said, so many truths I could have flung at him like bricks through a stained glass window, but none of them would have made him understand. Not really. Not in the way I needed him to. So I typed 4 words. You'll figure it out. I didn't wait for a reply. I turned my phone face down, went inside, and let the house wrap around me like armor, like shelter, like a whispered promise that maybe, just maybe, I didn't need their recognition to feel whole. Because I had already built something better. And the post? That was just the beginning. Some people expect closure to arrive in the form of an apology, a tearful confession, or perhaps even a reckoning, a moment of humility when those who hurt you are finally forced to acknowledge the truth they've denied for so long. But what no one tells you is that sometimes closure isn't a moment at all, but rather a slow, quiet realization that the people you spent your life trying to reach are not just unwilling, but incapable of meeting you where you are, and that the peace you were hoping to find in their validation can only exist once you stop looking for it in their direction altogether. After the photo went up and the internet did what it always does, reacted, shared, dissected, I didn't feel triumph, exactly. What I felt was something closer to weightlessness. As though I had been dragging an invisible anchor behind me for years and only now realized I could let it go. Not because I had finally been seen by my family, but because I had been seen by people who had no stake in my life at all, and somehow, their words meant more than decades of silence. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent private messages. A former coworker from my first job in publishing left a comment that simply read, "This feels like every woman I know." Even strangers, women in their 50s, mothers, daughters, people who had no idea what my family looked like, shared their own stories in the comments. Forgotten birthdays. Uncelebrated milestones. Brothers who got praise and sisters who got chores. And in all of that, I realized something quietly devastating. I was never alone. I had just been trained to think I was. But my family's reaction, or lack thereof, was what truly underlined everything I had always known but had tried, for so long, not to believe. Tyler's text came first, that blunt, aggressive, "What the hell is your problem?" as if my act of telling the truth had somehow violated an unspoken agreement to keep everything wrapped in pretty paper and denial. I didn't respond again. Not because I was trying to be cold, but because there was no version of that conversation that didn't end in him defending his comfort and accusing me of ruining it. My mother followed the next morning with a message that felt like it had been drafted carefully, maybe even rewritten a few times, before she hit send. "I saw your post. I'm sorry if we ever made you feel less important. That was never our intention. Hope the house brings you joy." It was one of those statements designed to look like an apology, but built entirely from evasions, no ownership, no accountability, just a vague, antiseptic recognition that I had feelings once and that perhaps she'd accidentally tripped over one. I didn't answer her either. It wasn't until 2 days later that Tyler showed up at the lake house, completely unannounced, pulling up in his leased black SUV with music still playing through the open windows. Stepping out in jeans that looked like they'd been ironed and sunglasses he didn't take off, even as he walked toward the porch like he expected me to be impressed he'd come all this way. I was on the dock, staining the final section of wood before winter set in, and I didn't turn around until I heard his voice behind me, casual, rehearsed, like he was already mid-conversation. "You really posted that just to humiliate us, huh?" he said, and I turned to see him standing there with that half-grin he always used when he thought he was winning an argument before it even began. "I mean, if you had a problem, you could have just talked to us. You didn't have to go full drama queen for the whole world to see." I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on my jeans, and looked at him in a way I hadn't before, not like a rival, not even like a brother, but like someone I had once known very well and no longer recognized. "I didn't post it for you," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I posted it for me. For every year you got a celebration, and I got a reminder that I didn't matter. For every time I sat in a room full of people who knew my name and still looked through me like I was glass." He rolled his eyes and stepped forward, but I didn't move. "Come on, Laura," he said, and this time there was something almost pleading beneath the annoyance, something rawer than I expected. "You never said anything. How the hell were we supposed to know? I laughed then, not bitterly, but quietly, because there was nothing else to do in the face of that kind of willful blindness. You didn't have to be told. You just had to care enough to look. I gestured behind me, toward the house, the trees, the stillness I had earned one slow day at a time. You all saw me working every holiday, answering every call, showing up for every birthday, every engagement, every disaster. You just never asked me why I was always alone after. He didn't have a response to that. He just stood there, sunglasses still on, hands in his pockets, as if he were waiting for a script to appear in the air between us. I watched his chest rise and fall once, twice, and then he turned, walked back to his car, and drove away without another word. Later that evening, I played back the entire encounter in my mind, not to relive it, but to seal it, like closing a door that had been left ajar for too long. I sat on the dock as the sun disappeared behind the trees, the water rippling with the quiet of the evening, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the tug of wanting anything from them. Not recognition, not approval, not even guilt, just distance. And peace. Monica arrived that weekend with 2 bottles of wine and a grocery bag full of cake mix, frosting, and candles. You didn't get a cake, so we're fixing that, she said, dropping everything on the kitchen island with the determination of someone who has spent her entire life watching other people get what they don't deserve and deciding to rebalance the scales in small, fierce ways. We baked it together, badly, laughing when the layers slid sideways and the icing turned lumpy. We threw a tiny party, just the 2 of us, a playlist full of angry women with guitars, and a crooked chocolate cake covered in way too many candles. I didn't invite anyone else. Not because I didn't want company, but because, for once, I didn't feel like proving anything to anyone. When Monica left the next morning, I stood on the dock again, alone, with the last slice of cake and a single candle flickering in the breeze. I lit it, just one, and let the flames sway gently before I blew it out. I didn't make a wish. I didn't need to. Later, as the sky dimmed and the lake turned that soft steel blue that only comes just before winter, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. My father. I stared at the screen for a long time, watching his name blink there like a question I'd already answered in my heart. I didn't press play. I didn't listen. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because sometimes, the story doesn't end with reconciliation or clarity or some neat moral about forgiveness. Sometimes it ends with silence, and in that silence, something finally grows where all the noise used to be. And that, I realized, might be the only kind of birthday gift I ever really needed.